Hey guys, we're on another episode of The Secret Recipe. I am super excited to have Jake Havron here. What an amazing story. So, all of my guests, I'm very, very picky and particular about who sits next to me, who sits on the couch, and I want to give so much value to my audience. And to hear that you were a nurse and you literally was just like, you know what? Let me step out and venture off into my own path and manifest the life that I want. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm honored to be here. I am the same way with you. Like, I'm very particular with who I bring on my shows and who I'm around. And isn't that the story of life? You got to watch around who's in your circle, right?
Yes.
And so I'm very privileged to be here. And, to be honest, I didn't even know I could be here 6 years ago. Wow. 6 years ago, I was working in the ER as a nurse, and for anyone that's in the medical profession, I respect you and I adore, especially these past few years. I mean, just true heroes in that sense. And I had a moment though where I believe, people listening right now, they've had these emotionally charged moments that maybe was a good decision that moved off into their new life, or maybe it was a bad decision.
Yep.
But I had a decision that actually changed the trajectory of my life, and this moment was quiet in the ER. Sitting behind the desk, and the doors slam open. There's 2 docs, 4 nurses around this stretcher, and there's this man in his late 40s that had a heart attack, and probably shouldn't have been there. It wasn't genetic, it was environment, it was his life decisions. And so basically he was dead on the stretcher, and we had to go save his life. Wow. And for me at this time, because I'm still new at the nursing part, this was my very first time to literally save a life. Like, when you're in nursing and you're learning all this, you're helping people, but there's not those moments too often where you literally save a life or have the potential to. So I was like, this is it. Now I'm acting so fast. There's not really time to think. And we actually bring him back and resuscitate him, and he's still in a coma. And about an hour later, his family comes in. And you can only imagine with 2 kids and a wife what they're thinking. They lost their father and they lost their husband. And so I'm seeing the wife bawl her head off, and I see the kids, they're in their age where they don't know what's going on yet, but they don't see their daddy responding, and they're freaking out a little bit. And we have to, crowd control, make sure they're good, they understand. But I'm trying to make sure this guy comes out of the coma. Yeah. What comes to be is he comes out of the coma, he sees his kids, he sees his wife, and he looks at me, and his eyes just start welling up, and I'm like, this man he almost lost his kids, his family. Wow. He's never going to be here again. Let's go, let's take care of him. Getting ready to discharge him, fast forward. He's like, what do I have to do to not be here? His family's saying the same thing, show us what to do, what prescriptions, all these things. And I'm like, yes, they understand, let me help them. So I discharged them, and I felt like a hero in that moment. I felt so excited. And, it doesn't have to always be a life saved. Maybe it's someone you just helped, put them on a new path. Maybe you gave them some words of advice. Now, 5 years later, they're a completely different person. You could save a life in that way. But for me, I felt like a hero. And the sad thing was that a couple months later, I was in that same hospital, and the same doors opened up. There was different docs and different nurses, but there was the same man on the stretcher with another heart attack, literally about losing his life. And in that moment, I didn't know who it was. I was like, well, I would have not even thought or imagined that could have been him. It took me a couple seconds, and as nurses, you don't have time to really think so much. You have to react. That's why you have to prepare for it, just to react and respond. But when it hit me, what it did, and it's the best way I could describe it, because I didn't have personal development back then. For someone that's saying, I'm just getting into personal development, I just learned this. I was like 6 years ago, I'd never listened to a podcast. I despised books. I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. But what happened is this little tear happens. It was literally just a small little shift. And from that moment, I just realized maybe nursing's not for me. Maybe I'm not meant to get people out of the hospital. Maybe I'm start to keep them out. And I loved fitness at the time. And so my journey, the smartest thing I could have done was go from nursing, sustainable job, to an even more sustainable, higher paying job called personal training.
Wow.
Right? And it's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't like that. But that was the start to this whole journey where I started to dive into books, started to dive into podcasts. Never knew what entrepreneurship meant. But the moment I tasted that freedom, life hasn't been the same. And now here we are today where, I'm working with private business consulting with companies that are multiple 9 figures to people starting to launch their programs, their coaching services, and speaking on stages all over the world because of that one decision.
Wow. So a lot of people are so scared to make that one decision, right? I'm surrounded by people in my community. I have a digital community called Girl Mob, and all of the women that I talk to, they're like, I'm so scared. Like, I have kids, I have a family that's relying, I have my mom that put me through college to be a lawyer, and I hate it, and I don't want to be in the courtroom, but I'm so scared to make that one decision. What advice would you give to someone that now hears your story and says he made one decision and it changed his life? What about those people that are scared to make that one decision?
Such a great question. And you know, our human perception, the way that the mind works, is we like to generalize things. So we think that one decision is the result of many outcomes.
Yeah.
The truth is you got to think of like taking decisions as you're walking. And if I want to go from here where we're at right now to Starbucks around the corner, that same approach, thinking that one step to get from here to Starbucks, I have to take one big step to get there. No, there's many steps in between. You have to take many steps because that's how you are made. And it's the same thing with your progress in life. So that was one step. And now it was a huge step that put me in a 1-degree path different than that normal path, which was nursing. But guess what? I took many, many, many steps after that. Doesn't mean after nursing I was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to go be a personal trainer. I just was starting to have questions in my head of like, okay, what am I going to do after college? If I don't want to be a nurse, what am I going to do? What does this look like? Am I going to go be a fitness trainer? Do I like fitness? Am I going to be a fitness influencer? All these were little steps that happen. And so my guidance for someone listening right now is that the steps aren't as important as much as the values and beliefs you have. So my values and beliefs changed. My value was, instead of getting people out of the hospital, I want to start keeping them out. Okay, well, I love fitness. I want to help people that don't want to, that want to be with me. And the people in the hospital, they were there. Sometimes they don't want to be there, and I was a nuisance to work with them. That value changed, then guided all my steps behind it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So my tactical advice for anyone that's like, you know what does this step look like? Do I have to like risk it all? Do I have to risk it for the biscuit? Do I have to pay all this financial income to potentially lose it all? Do I have to stop seeing my family? No. Those are very rare cases, and I have a few of those in my own life, and that's what set me on different quantum leaps, and I wouldn't recommend it because it's very scary.
Yeah.
But you got to just see the one little shift, if you could see this visually, is I'm just taking my hands, and I'm just lifting one hand slightly off and creating a 2-millimeter gap.
Yes.
And over time, no one thinks that makes a difference. But over 1 month, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, you're in a completely different destiny because of that one little shift. So don't overestimate or underestimate that power of that small shift. Just keep making those small shifts day by day by day by having the new value and the new star, the new North Star, which is, what do you want out of life?
Yes.
Do you want to be the same, or do you want to find something different? The different doesn't have to be a known destination. It's just the thought of, I want something different in my life. What do I have to do to get something different?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think that it's so important that we continue to speak on that, those that have made it a little bit further than we ever thought we would be. Because when you are seeking to go somewhere, right? Say right now we're in LA, we're like, oh, I'm going to drive to Laguna Beach. But we've never driven to Laguna Beach before. What is the first thing you do? You pull out a map, you pull out your phone.
Yes.
There are instructions that are going to help you get there. But say you're on the highway and you miss the first exit. You don't give up the whole trip. You don't give up the whole journey and go back home. You're like, oh, I don't want to go to the beach anymore. I missed the exit.
I made the wrong turn. It's not made for me.
Or you ran a red light and you get a ticket. You get a slap on the wrist and you say, oh, I'm not going to the beach no more. You keep going. But sometimes in entrepreneurship, what happens is you get your first no, you get your first disappointment, you accidentally spend the money in the wrong place, or someone disappoints you that said they would do something for you and they don't, and then you say, you know what, working a job is better for me. Or, oh, you know what, let me go back to living a very safe life because... But if you knew that there was $1 million that you truly had access to, or if you knew that there was happiness and peace at the end of that route that you truly had access to, you wouldn't care about the minor disappointments.
Yes.
You wouldn't care about the missed exit. You wouldn't care about something taking you a little longer. A lot of times we're like, oh, I need to get to the airport. I got to hurry. And you think that it's 20 minutes away and it ends up being 40 minutes. You don't cancel your flight, right? But a lot of times we cancel our plans when it comes to living the life that we dream of because we've missed one exit.
So powerful. Wow. That was great.
Thank you. I think that you are a living testimony to show that you missed the exit, but you didn't give up. And now look at where you are. And you have a unique process that you teach. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So over this time, and that was so amazing. Like, that is the exact analogy, representation of what it means in this journey. So I have to constantly remind myself, even today, during these times, I'm in positions I know that are going to be so small comparatively where I'll be 1, 3, 5 years from now. But there's still troubles and pains I go through where I have to reframe it. The process is called reframe, meaning taking a certain situation, because it's a context, it's a square around it, and you got to put it, that current frame is like, oh, this is pain, this is struggle, why is this happening to me? You have to put a different frame over it and change the question, which is, what is happening here? Why is this happening? What can I make the most out of this? This might be a painful lesson now, but maybe this could be a message in the future, and that helps me get through those tough times. So what you said is so powerful, and ever since this pursuit, ever since nursing, even though I wasn't consciously realizing this, it was all subconscious, I was wondering what influences people. Because in sales, you have to influence, right? And there's a difference between, a very fine line between influence versus manipulation.
Yes.
The very fine line is, what's the ultimate outcome?
Yep.
If the ultimate outcome is for myself, it's unfortunately manipulation.
Yep.
And I don't care how good it looks and how much you act like it's for them. If it's ultimately outcome for your commissions, your benefits, your services, whatever it is, manipulation.
That's so good. And that's one thing people do not talk about in the sales field.
There's a lot of tactics, there's a lot of strategies they teach, but they don't teach ethical congruence. Yeah. And ethical congruence is harder to teach than the sales and strategies. Right? Ethical congruence comes down to, what are your beliefs, what are your values? You're an amazing woman of God. You have your ethical congruence. Now, does it mean that because you believe in God, you're ethically congruent? No, because there's a lot of people that are actually very bad, and they say that they believe in the name of God, right? In the name of Jesus. But if you have ethical congruence, it makes life a lot easier, because you will do the things that are best for others and not for yourself, because you are here to serve others, because you're a vessel. Right? So there's that difference of influence, manipulation. Influences ultimate outcomes for you. I will still benefit in some way, but is the ultimate outcome for you? Now, I've had situations, and I had to check myself real quick, where I was like, Jake, you're doing this right now because you need to make that payment, or you need to get that done. You need to change this right away with the way you're showing up. You better give them something extra value, because this is not feeling right, and you are going to, even though it might not see problems right in the moment, long-term game, it will burn you down. Yep. And so, going with what you asked earlier, I was on this pursuit of understanding humans and what influences them. And when I reverse engineered what was happening in that hospital room, I was like, this man who literally, I was at a point where he was about to lose his family. And you could tell he loved his family. The moment he saw them, his eyes welled up. It's not like he was ignorant to that. Yeah. This man was in a position of such a high emotional state that he could have changed his life for good. But for some reason, when he went home and we were done with him and we couldn't continue our process to serve him, he unfortunately was influenced by the food in his pantry, maybe the lack of exercise or nutrition or whatever he does, or even, I don't know if he had an alcohol problem or whatnot, that's his thing. But there was more influence and leverage from those things that actually took him away from his family than him trying to show up for his family. Why would he do that? For the second time, why would he be influenced by those things and have a second time at death's door? Yeah. And when I realized that, I was like, maybe this is something that I want to pursue, because if I can not only help people stay out of the hospital as a personal trainer, that's how I started, I'm not that anymore. It's like, when in sales, there's people that you might have a life-changing product or service, but if they don't get properly influenced, they will either, number one, not use your product or service and get all the benefits from it, or number two, they will not use your service because you didn't properly influence them, they didn't see the power of it, and that there's more pain to not use it than to use it. And now someone else who doesn't have ethical congruence comes by, knocks on their door, calls them up, says the right things at the right time. They're all about manipulating, which means, what can I get out for myself? And they unfortunately burn that person or put them in a worse state where you could have been the difference maker. You could have helped them be saved from that person that doesn't have ethical congruence, because we would be fools to say that there is no evil in the world. There are people who are not out for themselves. us faith-driven leaders, entrepreneurs, we have to step up and learn these skills of influence. That's why I call it the blueprint to human influence. We have to understand within seconds when you see someone and you hear the way they talk, what are their motivators? Are they more pain-driven or pleasure-driven? Are they looking for possibilities, or you need to speak to them in necessities? All these things you could pick up on that I've learned how to train and incorporate, so then you can actually be a healer. Because here's the thing, Skittles. You're in sales, right?
Yeah.
Right, and anyone that doesn't say they're in sales, I'm gonna ask them, are you a parent?
Yeah.
You definitely have to sell either your kids. Are you in a relationship? You have to sell your spouse.
Yes.
Are you like, if you have none of that, are you a human? You have to get around and sell yourself to something.
Yes, you're selling yourself every day.
You're selling yourself. You're selling a vision. You're selling a product. You're selling a service. You're selling a movement, right? Martin Luther King, he was an incredible salesman in the most beautiful way, because he had to sell a vision to people that had, there was so much pain that people were getting backlashed literally for following his movement, but he had to say the vision was greater than the potential small pains.
Yes.
Right? So we're all in the position of selling. The key is like, do we understand that sales, is it a hassle? Is it slimy? What's those words that come up? Or is it you being a healer?
Yeah.
Because I believe, and this is my own belief, and this is how it changes things, I believe sales is the ability to find the want or find the pain, disturb it a little. What I mean by disturb, it's not in a bad way, it's not a bad connotation. It means that you have to show the person that this pain will not go away or coerce in. If I was in the hospital and someone came in with a little cut on their arm, or let's say it's a pretty big cut, and this cut could potentially lead to sepsis and potentially death. You know, sepsis is the infection in the blood.
Yeah.
If they didn't know that, then, and I told them you need to take these antibiotics and all these things, if they didn't know the potential for all the pain, do you think they're going to want to take all those antibiotics and stay on protocol? No. So I had to really show them, like, hey, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And I give them the right stuff, and now they're healed. It's the same in sales.
Wow. I love that. And I think that people become more successful, and the leaders that I look at that are extremely successful, they are selling products that heal their audience.
Yes.
And no matter whatever it is you have, like I opened a co-working space for female entrepreneurs because I thought entrepreneurship when it comes to being a female, it's very lonely. You don't have a tribe of people. You can't just walk into a room and see a bunch of female entrepreneurs that are working, that are like, come over and sit with us. So I created the space. And so even though we are selling a membership, I'm healing what I know is the need for that area of women, you know? And so I loved everything that you said. So tell us a little bit more about your process.
Yeah. So the process, the blueprint to human influence, you're phenomenal at this. You probably do a lot of these things naturally. Yeah. And this is the thing about, someone listening, they're like, oh, well, I'm pretty good at sales and I already probably know most of these things. That's great. But some of us don't know that what you're doing is actually part of the influence experience, so you're doing it subconsciously. We call it subconsciously competent. You're doing it without knowing. It's like if you go to, let's say, France, and you go to a baker there who's been baking since they're 8 years old, and you go up and you want to learn, these world-renowned, you're like, I want to learn how you make that, let's say, tiramisu, right?
Yeah.
I hope that's a French dessert, right? Yeah. But let's just use it as an example. And you say, teach me the ways. That baker, most of these bakers who are naturally bred, they're so good, they're just so just in flow with it, they don't have recipes.
Yep.
Because it's all within them and they do it naturally. And so a lot of us in sales, we do things so naturally that you might be doing it incredibly, but what if you learn the recipe and you realize you're missing one ingredient that can make it better? Yeah. Or if you're missing one little way of not the ingredient, but how much? Or how long do you cook it? Or how little do you cook it?
Yeah.
And people in sales and leadership, they are missing one or two ingredients. That is the difference of you baking a cake versus you're missing your baking soda, which is the smallest amount of ingredient. And it's the difference between having a cake that people love versus a deflated thing that only certain people will buy because they feel sorry for you.
Wow.
Right? So when you do this blueprint to human influence and you understand the methodologies of it, there's a cool part of it that really comes to 4 parts. And I'll save for the time on this. I'll talk about one really quick. It's the decision-making methods that people make decisions on.
Wow.
And there's 10 types of decision-making methods. We won't go through them all. But you got to understand, people are bombarded with ads. They're bombarded with, like, there's almost 6,000 to 10,000 ads you see a day on average per the human.
Wow, I never knew that.
And crazy. And so we become, since we were little kids, desensitized to knowing what attracts us, so then we're going to make a decision on it. And so a couple of the decision-making methods are we making decisions towards something or away from something? If you're telling me about your product and service and I'm an away type of person, meaning I need to get away from my past, my pains, my struggles to make me feel like I'm motivated, if you're selling me on all the things of the pleasures and the things we could go and the outcomes and the possibilities, you're not going to speak to my language, because I was raised like, you know what, I need to get away from that. Like your financial service product, it's not about me making millions. It's about me not ever having to pay rent again with a day left. It's about me not having to worry about if I'm ever going to pay for my kids' tuition again. That speaks more to me than you trying to sell the possibilities.
Wow.
And a lot of entrepreneurs.
That is so good.
And how do you pick that up? They just say, you just ask, why are you in your current job? And they will tell you. And they don't tell you, like, this is my decision-making method. If I say, let me ask you this. Why are you doing what you do right now?
Honestly, because I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm passionate about no one that looks like me, that came from where I came from, going through the same thing that I went through.
And what makes you so passionate about that, with knowing that?
Just understanding what I went through and wishing there was someone that I could see a blueprint, you know, for how to do it and skip those long, drawn out, sad nights and months and weeks. Yeah. That's
so beautiful. And within that, and am I going to find out all the answers of your blueprint from one question? Absolutely not. There's a whole process to this.
Yeah.
But from that, I could tell that you have a big heart for understanding and helping people to get away from their pains and struggles, because that's what you got away from. You're doing this not because of all the opportunities and all these things. That is a focus. But your primary focus is that you want to help not only yourself continually to get away from that, because that's why you're doing this, but help other people not live in that life of where they're a struggle, where they don't know what's going on. They're not motivated or inspired. They don't have someone to look up to. So when I talk about, let's say, a service I was presenting to you, I present that service in a way where it's like, hey, do you see how if we were working together and I did this marketing or consulting, you see how more women and men will never have to go through that experience again? You're like, oh my gosh, that speaks more to me, instead of, do you see how this can help you get to 10 million downloads, you can make this amount of money? That might be good, but this probably speaks to you more. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Wow, that's good.
It's fun.
That's
fun.
Good, and that's deep. So what is your secret recipe to success?
Oof. So my secret recipe is, I will say first, it is definitely being aligned with Christ and following in the steps of what it means to be very bold in your faith, because faith is what allows you to step into places unknown, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't step in that place unknown. And to add on top of that, I believe there's a very important secret recipe, which is, I call it the ready, fire, aim approach.
Okay.
And if it's okay, I'd love to share just a quick story on this.
Share.
Yeah. So it was about a couple years ago, 2019. Are you familiar with Tony Robbins? Have you heard of him? Yeah. So for anyone that knows Tony Robbins, one of the most incredible speakers and mentors in the world, leading events of 15,000 people. I got invited last minute in 2019 to go to one of his events. And I was invited by one of my business partners, and we were sitting up in the general admissions, and she got paralyzed the midways down 7 years before from an ATV accident, so she's in a wheelchair, a beautiful, glowing woman, but unfortunately, for her now it's actually a benefit, because she's now using this to her advantage to help inspire more people, but it was more of a victim mindset at first, and she had to flip that. And we had to sit separately, because she had to sit in the section where people in wheelchairs are, which she doesn't like. 30 minutes go by, and she calls me up. I'm sitting up in the nosebleeds. I had to literally look down with my binoculars, and she's like, Jake, I got a front row ticket. The crew member helping me got me in the front. I'm like, what? And I was like, how did that happen? She didn't have to pay a single dime. And she was like, I just asked, how do I get down there? Who do I have to know? And after enough persistency, she was asking the right questions. The crew member got resourceful and got someone in the front row that had an extra ticket and got her in there. And I'm blown away. I'm like, can you see if they have another one? And so she was like, I'll try. I was like, I sure hope you try. So 20 minutes go by, 10 minutes right before Tony gets on stage. And she was like, Jake, she texted me all caps, come on down, like they got you an extra ticket. I'm like, are you serious? She's like, yeah. I'm running down the nosebleeds like it's a Price is Right, like my name just got called, and I'm excited. They stop me there, they see my name badge, and I'm like, no, they got me like a front row pass. And my life completely changed being in that front rows.
Wow.
Why? Because power of proximity.
Yes.
I'm around all these very successful business people. I'm like, who am I? I'm this like young buck still, and I'm learning the ropes, but they don't know any different. I rose to the occasion. Fast forward a couple months go by, November 2019. I go to a Tony event in Miami. It's at the American Airlines Arena where the Miami Heat play. And now I'm in the front rows because I made best friends that now they're taking me to every event in the front. And it was like that one decision. And Tony asks on day one, he says, what is your extraordinary life? Write it down. Life on your terms. What does this mean? And for you listening right now, maybe you've never thought about this. What is your extraordinary life? And so normally, at that point in 2019, I was like, I'm going to be a celebrity trainer because I was doing my online training programs and working with all these high-level clients. I was like, I'm going to be a celebrity trainer. I'm going to be training Tony Robbins. I'm going to be training all these celebs. And a couple days before that, I went to a speaker workshop that I was like, maybe I should go learn how to be a speaker. I got invited last minute. It was a hefty ticket. I was like, I don't need this right now, but I don't want to miss out. And taking that step to pay that much money to get that last spot at that speaker workshop, it planted a seed in me saying, maybe you can be a speaker. You're around all these other people who you're speaking just as good as. You're still new, but you're still just as good in some way. Maybe there's something, but I'll put it in my back pocket. I don't know hustle play.
Yeah.
So he asked, what's your extraordinary life? And instead of writing, I'm going to be a celebrity trainer and all those things, I was like, maybe this is where I change my destiny. Maybe this is where I write that next chapter, even though I had no belief in it, no confidence. I wrote down, I'm going to be speaking on stages all over the world.
Wow.
I'm going to be paid $50,000. I was like, no, that's too much. $20,000. No, Jake, go big. This is what it means, audacious, like extraordinary life. Okay, $50,000. Oh gosh, this is a scary number to even see. And you know what? Go all in. I'm going to say, I'm going to be speaking on Tony's stage. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, there's no freaking way. But that's what it means to have an extraordinary life. It's so much bigger that the woman cannot think of it. It's a God-sized vision. And God has ways to play in it where if I was to dampen myself down, then maybe it is a God-sized vision, or I'm sorry, man-sized vision. But no, I had to give it a God-sized vision. But I had no confidence in it. So he tells us to go share it, and I'm sharing it with people like you next to me, and you didn't know anything different. So you're like, yeah, this is amazing. And I was like, oh my gosh, she believes in me. It's like, you had no clue, right? And so then, the music goes up, everyone goes to the front stage, and I'll land the plane here. And he says, everyone go sit down. And I was like 7 rows back in the front rows. And I was like, I don't want to go sit down yet. There's something within me saying, don't sit down. And so I go off to the side of this big arena where the water station is. Because if you're sipping on water, the crew member will be not a nice guy if they tell you to sit down when you're sipping on water. So I was like really trying to use that. So I'm sipping on water, and Tony goes, who wants to share their extraordinary life? And without hesitation, my arm just goes straight up. I couldn't even think. It was so reactive. And he points to me, he says, you, give him the mic. And in front of 15,000 people, I'm literally shaking, my heart's palpitating. And all I'm saying in my head is like, God, if this is how you line it up where I changed my destiny because you took me to that speaker workshop last minute, you took me here to the front rows of the stage, you now gave me this opportunity, then let's freaking go. And so they're getting me the mic, and I'm standing there quivering, but I'm like, Jake, this is your one chance. Do not mess it up. And I'm like, I'm telling the best speaker in the world this. And I go, he's like, what's your name, where are you from, and what's your extraordinary life? And I have this video. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see it on the top pinned post. And I go, my extraordinary, and I start stuttering. I'm telling the best speaker in the world that I'm about to go speak on stages all over the world, and I cannot even say my first sentence. You know why? Because the mic reverberates and you couldn't hear yourself. So I'm like, this mic's not working, but it is working. I was like, Jake, don't let this slip up now, keep going. And I tell him, I'm like, my extraordinary life is, I'm going to be speaking on stages all over the world. I'm going to be paid $50,000 to speak, and I'm going to be speaking on your stage, Tony. And the whole crowd erupted. And from that moment, as I wrap this all up, that moment, people came up to me like, how do I support you? This is amazing. I see it in you. This woman from a speaker bureau came up and said, we need to talk. I have a stage for you. And I was like, you have a stage for me? Like, what? I was not saying it that way, but I was freaking out. And that my life completely changed.
Wow.
3 months later, I'm speaking at an event, and that's how I meet the love of my life, because she saw me speaking at that same stage. It was my very first stage that I spoke at. Because of this step of taking a ready, fire, aim approach, that I met the love of my life, who's a world-renowned speaker, and she had to see me on stage so she could see someone that speaks of her type of caliber, or else there would have been never a connection.
Wow.
And so if you want to talk about a secret recipe, I say live a life by ready, fire, aim. Not ready, aim, and you're trying to wait till it's the perfect time and an opportunity's gone.
Yes.
Fire, you're going to be close, you might hit it, you might not, you re-aim and you fire again, and that will get you so much closer to life, because life serves the bold and life gives abundance to those that take that step. And that's just been the story of my life, and we're going to be continually going from here.
Jake, oh my God, my heart is pounding. First of all, that story was so amazing. I resonated with that story so much. There's so many things in my life that I've just said, okay, I'm going to this event. I don't know who I'm going to meet there. I don't know what's going to happen. But if God allows me to buy the ticket and get on the flight, then I'm supposed to be there. And it literally happens like that. So it's so amazing. What I want the audience to take away is just do it. Yes. Write it down. Like, I literally, in December of 2022, I wrote down, you need to speak more. You need to get on more stages. You need to put your voice out there, tell your story, launch a podcast. And literally, it's not even the beginning of the year, and here we are, you know? And I'm being asked to be on all these amazing podcasts. So what you have to do is you have to first write it down.
Yes.
Then secondly, you have to take action.
Yes.
And then it's going to start unfolding. Like, I feel like once you start speaking to the universe speaks back. God speaks back with action, you know? I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of The Secret Recipe. Jake, you are so amazing.
Thank you.
How can my audience find you?
Instagram's the best way, at Jake Havron, H-A-V as in Victor, R-O-N. And same thing with the website if you want to get more details on me, jakehavron.com. But send me a message on Instagram. I want to hear about what stood out.
Yes.
I'll be letting Skittles know. We love seeing those things. And it's been an absolute honor. You're a phenomenal interviewer. This show, this whole setup, I love The Secret Recipe. You're going very far with this, and I am so excited to see where you're going.
Thanks, Jake. I'm excited as well.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. Until next time.